The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have Senator John Cosgrove with us today. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I want to thank you for coming down because we know how busy you are. This is a short session. You have, I think, 5 committee assignments,
yes,
we really appreciate your time.
Well, my pleasure to be here. It's always a lot of fun talking to you.
Talk to us a little bit about your district. I know you have a very vibrant district. It's very diverse. It's orientated towards the military, given the number of installations around there.
Yeah, Woody, I actually start at the North Carolina-Virginia line at the Atlantic Ocean. I have the southern part of Virginia Beach with Blackwater and Creeds. I have 37 precincts in Chesapeake. I have the bulk of the city of Chesapeake. But I also have 5 precincts in Portsmouth. I have 10 precincts in Suffolk. I have 3 precincts in Isle of Wight, 3 in Southampton, and 3 in Franklin. So it takes me about 2.5 hours to drive from one end of my district to the other.
And as a senator, you have about 200,000 constituents. Is that
a little over
right?
200,000? Yeah.
Wow. What about private industry in your district? What's that like?
Actually, private industry is vibrant in my district. In Chesapeake, we have like the corporate headquarters for Dollar Tree. They're putting in a $100 million facility in the city of Chesapeake. Suffolk is going gangbusters, bringing in Pete's Coffee and Green Mountain and a lot of other large manufacturers. Certainly we have the paper mill in Franklin, which is much scaled back from what it used to be. There's not a whole lot in Southampton or in Isle of Wight as far as industry goes. But we have an awful lot of small businesses that are locating in the district, and we're really, really happy to have them.
Now, what about military installations?
I only have 1 military installation in my district. I'm really close to several others,
sure.
But the Northwest radio station in southern Chesapeake is in my district.
Now, you're a retired naval officer yourself.
Well, I'm not retired, but I was a naval officer.
Oh, well, great. Well, tell us a little bit about the importance of veterans in your district and around the Commonwealth.
Well, the Commonwealth has one of the highest concentrations of veterans of any state in the United States. We have over 87,000 veterans in the Commonwealth of Virginia with a population of just over 800,000. So it's about 11% of our population is a veteran. And that's very important. You know, we've stepped up as a Commonwealth to try to help provide services that the VA has not provided. Thanks to House Appropriations and Senate Finance, we appropriated quite a bit of money to build 2 service centers, one in Northern Virginia and one in Virginia Beach, to give veterans the care they need that they're not getting from the VA right now.
How is homelessness for veterans in the Commonwealth?
It's much, much better. People will say we've eradicated homelessness for veterans, and that's not 100% true,
right.
Because there are some people that just don't want to have a roof over their head who are veterans. But we have done a lot. Now, we've opened up several shelters and actual homes for veterans who were once homeless. And so I think Virginia's doing one of the best jobs of any state in the United States, again, with that. We're very proud of the service we provide to veterans, and we continue to look for ways where we can help these people.
In terms of helping them seeking employment, Virginia has the Triple V program, Virginia
Right.
Values Veterans. Talk to us about that program.
Well, with Director Newby and Admiral John Harvey, Virginia struck gold. These 2 gentlemen are fabulous. And last year we opened a Veterans Help Center at Tidewater Community College in Chesapeake. And that veteran center is there for any veteran, not just students of the college. We also have passed legislation that will allow, or requires actually, the community colleges to look at the training jacket of a exiting veteran and to provide academic credit that matches classes that may have been offered at the community college. An example, if somebody was a medic in Afghanistan, Navy medics go with Marines. Okay? Let's say that person gets out and then wants to be a EMT or a firefighter.
Sure.
to make that person take basic first aid is ridiculous. You know, he could teach the class. So they look at that training he's already had, and he gets college credit for it. It means he pays less tuition. He or she gets done much quicker and is in the workforce a lot faster. It's good for the veteran. It's good for the Commonwealth.
What about the regulatory environment in terms of starting new businesses for veterans? I recall maybe a few years ago there was an effort to convince the State Corporation Commission to do away with some of the paperwork, especially on behalf of veterans who wanted to start new businesses.
Absolutely. We're trying to do everything we can to minimize regulation and expedite folks, not just veterans, but all people who want to start their own small business. Small business is the backbone of our economy in the United States, not just Virginia. And we've got to make it easier for people to go in and get businesses, reduce the tax burden, reduce the regulatory burden, reduce the permits and all the things they've got to do. And I think we're making good progress on that, and we'll continue to do so.
Now, is the Commonwealth still maintaining its reputation as one of the best places for businesses to be?
We are. Unfortunately, we're not number one like we used to be for many years. I think we're down to 5 or 6 now. But we're working hard on that too, and I think getting rid of some of that regulation and lowering the tax burden will bring us right back up to 1 or 2. We have a very, very welcoming attitude towards business, and that's shown because we've had so many companies come in to the Commonwealth. Governor McAuliffe, well, that's his gig. I mean, he loves making the deal. And he's been very successful in bringing some good companies into the Commonwealth.
I think there's some hope and optimism in terms of the administration that's about to be sworn in tomorrow in terms of doing away with sequestration.
Boy, we sure hope so. Sequestration is a killer for Hampton Roads in particular. Most of our economy is borne by the military. We have the world's largest Navy base. We have Langley Air Force Base. We have the sub-piers. We have Little Creek and Dam Neck where the special warfare teams participate. Fort Eustis, and every time there's a cutback in defense, people are let go, soldiers are not retained, contractors lose their contracts, and ships don't get built. So sequestration is just a function of Washington not doing its job to provide a budget. And I think under this administration and this Congress, I think you're going to see a big improvement in that, and we certainly hope so in Hampton Roads. But that being said, it's important for us in Hampton Roads to understand that we have to diversify our economy. We can't just depend on defense like we have for so many years. We're working hard with cybersecurity and modeling and simulation and biomedical companies who are coming in. Google and AOL are bringing in a transatlantic fiber optic cable up through Virginia Beach that's going to vastly improve broadband in the Commonwealth, all through the Commonwealth. So we're working on expanding that. Certainly the governor has brought in several companies. And to go back to your question before about are we still a good state for business, we brought in companies that have competed, that other states have competed, including North Carolina, offered them $9 million more to move to North Carolina, but they liked Virginia better. So we're happy to have them.
Talk to us a little bit more about what's going on in, excuse me, in the cybersecurity and biomedical fields.
Well, cybersecurity is critical right now. After this last election, everybody gets it. But even more importantly, identity theft and hacking and just cybersecurity in general is critical, especially for our military components. We are working really hard to get more and more students into college, taking cybersecurity and coding and becoming computer engineers and software engineers. It's a vastly underutilized degree, but when those kids get out of school, bam, they're making $80,000 to $100,000 their very first year.
Are there certificate programs, for example, at Tidewater that would allow a kid to become employed in that area?
Absolutely. It's not quite computer engineering or computer science, but they do have computer classes, security classes. They offer a CNA, a Certified Network Analyst, and those folks come out and they're easily employed as well.
And of course, in the biomedical area, I know there's a lot of research going on.
There is. We're also fortunate to have EVMS, Eastern Virginia Medical School. Our lieutenant governor has practiced there. And with them, working in conjunction with these biomedical companies, we're able to bring quite a bit of lucrative business and research into the Hampton Roads area. And Virginia Beach in particular is working very, very hard to bring that particular type of company in.
To refocus on veterans, I know that you've been involved in a joint committee on mental health for a number of years, and there's some recommendations regarding the population at large, but also veterans who are faced with PTSD problems.
Absolutely. We're particularly looking to make sure that veterans get the help they need if they have traumatic brain injury or PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. We've also, I carried a couple of bills, and Senator Deeds has carried a couple of bills that will make sure that if a person is incarcerated, that they immediately have a mental health assessment, because so many times somebody with mental health problems is just put in jail if there's not a bed available at the local hospital. So we also established in Chesapeake, and I'm very proud of this, by the way, we established in Chesapeake a Veterans and Mental Health docket in the General District Court.
Okay.
And that's really important. That's a certain docket that just doesn't need to be jammed in with traffic tickets and civil suits.
Is that something that people are thinking about replicating statewide? Have you talked to some of your other colleagues about that kind of thing?
Yes, I was a proponent of this for a couple of years and had a hard time getting it through the House of Delegates. We liked it in the Senate. But the Supreme Court actually came out with the guidelines for this to happen, and so now it's allowable throughout the Commonwealth. And I think you're going to see places like Virginia Beach and Northern Virginia, Norfolk, that has heavy population of veterans and military. I think you're going to see that replicated throughout the Commonwealth.
Now, there's another significant health-related issue in your district and around the Commonwealth, and it's also nationwide. And it deals with opioid and heroin addiction.
Oh.
Talk to us about how significant that is.
Woody, it's absolutely critical. We are losing so many of our kids, especially to heroin overdoses. But opioid abuse is just rampant. And there are issues going on that try to reduce that. I know that Senator Donovan is carrying a bill that requires an electronic transmission of any opioid prescription, which means that you can't go doctor shopping and go out with a bunch of different paper prescriptions. That will help reduce the amount of opioid that's out there. The problem, though, is that when you can't get the opioid, many people will go back and try heroin to try to get their high. Heroin is a killer. There have been so many deaths from overdose of heroin because the bad people that are taking this stuff to our kids are cutting it with something called fentanyl, which is 100 times more powerful than heroin and is absolutely terribly addictive, and will kill you if you overdose just a little bit.
You talked about Tidewater Community Colleges. How are your K-8 institutions in your district faring?
They're doing very well. We have great schools. Virginia Beach and Chesapeake are some of the highest rated schools in the Commonwealth. Portsmouth struggles a little bit. And maybe some of the other outlying counties that I represent struggle a little bit. But the more densely populated of my area has very good schools, very good SOLs. Chesapeake has one of the highest graduation rates in the Commonwealth. Virginia Beach is just a touch below Chesapeake in that age. And so we're very proud of our public schools in Hampton Roads. We've got to make sure, though, that throughout the rest of the Commonwealth that we share the benefits, because the kids in Botetourt County deserve as good an education as the one in Virginia Beach.
Now, what about charter schools? I know they're very few in the Commonwealth, and I know a lot of people think they could bring competition and choice.
Well, a lot of people do. Unfortunately, the Virginia Education Association and others lobby viciously hard to keep that from happening. They don't want any competition. I've always been a big proponent of charter schools. I know that it's very difficult to convince the local school board to issue a charter.
And that's the body that has the authority now to issue the charters.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we've looked at issuing charters from the Commonwealth, but of course the teachers union is not real happy about that idea.
Yeah, I think there was some legislation that was struck down by the Virginia Supreme Court, if my memory serves me correctly. The Virginia State Board of Education was the logical body to give that authority, but apparently that's going to require a constitutional amendment.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, constitutional amendment is a lengthy process. And for those that don't know how that, I know you know how it works, but for those that don't, you have to vote on a constitutional amendment. It has to pass both houses, the Senate and the House. It has to be carried over between an election year. I'm wrong. It needs to be voted on the next year, but it has to be exactly the same wordage. There can't be a comma. There can't be anything. And then at the next election, statewide election, the voters vote on that constitutional amendment.
Now, how are the reforms with reference to the standards of learning in K through 12 going?
They're going pretty well. And, one of the biggest proponents of reducing standards of learning, the number of tests, was Senator John Miller, who unfortunately passed away. Yes. He was just a wonderful man and a great legislator. He worked very hard to try to reduce the number of SOLs that were required, especially in the lower grades. And I actually carried a bill that would expedite the retake of SOLs in the lower grades as well. So SOLs, I think, are important. I think maybe we have too many of them.
Now, what about raises for teachers and other state employees, given the deficit that we currently face?
Well, we do have that deficit, but what we did last year I think was unconscionable. We said, all right, if we make as much money as we thought we would as a Commonwealth, you're going to get a 2% raise. Well, as we all know, we have a budget shortfall. So we had to go back to the teachers and state police and all the other folks that help keep our kids educated and our families safe and say, sorry, you're not getting a raise. We can't do that. If we're going to get a raise, get a raise. And I don't mean a little bonus, a 1% bonus, because that doesn't help their retirement. It doesn't raise their salary. It's just cash that's taxed at 40%. So we've got to do better. If we're going to give a raise, then give the raise.
And I take it it's making it more difficult to attract and retain state employees, be they law enforcement, state police, teachers, and others within the state of Virginia.
It is difficult. I know Chesapeake has had a real burden in trying to find the best teachers they can. I know we're losing state police. They're just dropping right and left. Really? They're going to work for the local law enforcement, where it used to be the other way around. We can't pay them enough to get a good class, at the academy. And these troopers, they work like crazy. They're out all the time in very dangerous circumstances, and they need to be paid a lot more than what they're getting.
Well, let's talk about that within the context of some legislation you have in terms of hate crimes.
Oh, yeah. My bill basically says that if you maim or injure or kill any first responder, not just a police officer, it can be a firefighter, sheriff's deputy, police officer, that if you do that because of their profession, that is then considered a hate crime, and it has a much higher penalty.
So where is that now? Is it in committee now?
Well, actually, it got out of courts committee, and it's now in Senate Finance because there's a $50,000 budget amendment that has to be addressed.
Now, I understand the assignments were recently made on the Senate side, and you were very pleased that you're back to privileges and elections.
I'm thrilled. Now, I spent 12 years in the House on privileged elections, and then another 2 years in the Senate on privileges and elections, and I was really happy when I wasn't on privileges and elections anymore. But I'm back on privileges and elections. We had to make some changes because we had 4 different senators. 2 were elevated to Congress. I guess you want to call that elevated.
You don't know for sure.
And then Senator Alexander was elected mayor of Norfolk, and then, as we said, Senator Miller passed away. So we have 4 brand new senators, so we had to shift around the committees. And I told them, put me on P&E, it's okay. I kid about it.
And you do have some legislation on primary elections, I believe.
I do. Basically, I think that if the Republicans have a primary, you ought to be registered as a Republican. If the Democrats have a primary, you ought to be registered as a Democrat. The only caveat to that is if you register as an independent, then you can vote in either or, but not both. So the bill's been tried before. We'll see what happens this year. I just think it'd make it much clearer and more fair in primary elections, because me as a Republican, I shouldn't have the ability to go and vote in a Democrat primary. I just don't think that's moral, and I don't think it's right.
Yeah, you can really game the system.
You really can. Yeah.
Another very exciting piece of legislation you have has to do with some very small fish, Menhaden.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be heard today in agriculture. The menhaden is a very small little fish. It's a very shiny fish, and they swim in huge schools. But it's a forage fish for the Commonwealth, or for the Chesapeake Bay. Stripers and all kinds of different fish feed on menhaden. The problem that we have is there's one company out of Reedville that harvests over 150 million metric tons of that tiny little fish. They take it back to Reedville, they crush them all up, they get omega-3 oil out of them, and the rest is basically used for feed. The problem is that I feel that they're taking too many out. Now, my bill wouldn't stop that, but my bill does require that the oversight of the menhaden leave the General Assembly, where it is now, and goes to the Virginia Marine Resources Commission. I'm an electronics engineer. What do I know about biodiversity in the Chesapeake Bay? And I would dare say we don't have a marine biologist in the General Assembly, so I don't think we ought to be managing that fishery. I think it ought to go to the experts.
So is there some resistance to that?
Oh yeah, Omega doesn't want to hear that at all.
Oh, I see.
They like it where it is.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. You know, there are a couple of other industries that we very seldom talk about, but they contribute a significant amount of revenue to the Commonwealth. That's forestry and farming.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about those.
Well, I do have a very large district, and over half of it is agricultural and rural. Forestry is a huge industry, as is agriculture. In fact, agriculture is our biggest industry in the Commonwealth.
People don't understand that, I don't believe.
They really don't,
Yeah,
but I got to
yeah.
tell you, I have so many farmers, and these folks are not just wearing overalls and pitchforks.
Right.
These are smart business people. They have to manage their crops. They have to manage crop insurance. They have to rotate their crops from field to field. These guys are almost scientists in what they do, and they produce a lot of food for a lot of people. And a lot of people just think, hey, I go to the grocery store and I get a chicken. So it's got to come from someplace.
I guess I remember Todd Haymore, when he was Secretary of Agriculture, telling me that there are a lot of soybeans that go to China from the Commonwealth.
Absolutely, and we grow a lot of them in Hampton Roads. And we have a huge port that we export a lot of those soybeans to China. So it's a very valuable export crop.
And that's one of the big economic drivers in the Commonwealth, that Port of Virginia.
It is. It's actually responsible for about 1 in 8 jobs in the Commonwealth.
1 in 8 jobs.
Yeah. Whether they work at the port itself, whether they're truckers that work carrying the containers from either the port to the trains, or from the port all the way to Chicago. We have distribution centers all across the Commonwealth that support the merchandise brought in to our port. So, like I said, 1 out of 8 jobs in the Commonwealth is either directly or indirectly related to the Port of Virginia.
Now, do we still have a fairly good competitive advantage in relation to other ports on the eastern seaboard?
We have the largest competitive advantage right now, but it won't last for long. We are the only port that can actually bring in the post-Panamax ships. They're huge.
That's
ships.
as a result of the widening of the Panama Canal over the last, almost 10 years now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And now those very, very large ships come through the Panama Canal from China and the Pacific Rim. And there's only one port that can really handle them, and that's the Port of Hampton Roads. We have the depth already. New York is working feverishly to try to accommodate those ships, but they can't dredge their port. They're on bedrock. They actually have to lift their bridges. You want to talk about something expensive.
Absolutely.
But they're doing it. And Savannah has been a tremendous competitor as well. But we also have an advantage because those ships have to go up the Savannah River to get to the port itself. So if we're smart and we really market it well, once somebody defines their port, it takes a lot to get them to leave. So we're working pretty hard on that as well.
Now, I understand there have been some major investments. Last year, I think around $300 million, and there are ongoing investments to improve the capacity and other things at the port.
Absolutely. It's actually $350 million last year. And that is for infrastructure at the port. We're also leasing the old Maersk terminal in Portsmouth that has a beautiful facility, lots of cranes. And so that's now being leased as part of the Port of Virginia. And that's going to increase our capacity as well. We also have worked with the railroads to establish the Heartland Corridor, where we take stack containers 2 at a time, 2 on top of each other, and take them all the way to Chicago, which is and other large cities as well. And we did that by actually digging under the bridges so that the height can get under it. So.
Now you mentioned distribution centers around the Commonwealth. I know there's one at Front Royal. I see a sign that says Inland Port.
Absolutely.
Is that one of the big distribution centers?
It is. Actually, we bring a lot of containers there by rail, and it's then shifted out other places. There's actually a port in Richmond here that we barge up the James River. So yeah, the inland port is, people kind of giggle about it, but it's an important distribution center.
You know, when people think about transportation, the first part of the state they think about is Northern Virginia, but you've got really interesting issues there with all the tunnels and bridges.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, yeah. But we are, if you come to visit Hampton Roads, once you get to Williamsburg on 64, you're going to go, what has happened? Because there's nothing but orange barrels and Jersey walls, but we're expanding that road a great deal. And we're also expanding the interchange of Interstate 64 and 264. It's going to the beach and to Richmond off of 64. And then also working on the high-rise bridge in Chesapeake. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to do this, but we're able to do that because of the tax structure that we did 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I guess there's a criteria now in place that allows for a more objective selection of projects to go forward. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's a scoring system, and it really does take the politics out of road building. In the past, it was whoever's the chairman of this or that could choose where the road money went, and there were some bad decisions made in the past. This bill that we passed, I guess either last year or 2 years ago, does a numerical scoring on road congestion, return on investment, cost,
safety, economic development,
and also environmental issues. So what was going to happen, Route 460 going through Suffolk was looking to be done, but it came up with almost a 0 in the scoring system. So that isn't going to happen because it just didn't provide the benefit that other roads would.
Well, great. We're so glad that you took the time to come here today. Good luck the remainder of the session.
Thank you, Woody.
Senator John Cosgrove, good to see you again, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I am Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.